The Holy Gospel according to John, as found in the 2nd chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
On the 3rd day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. People seem to have perfect memories when it comes to big mistakes. Back in the 60s and 70s, ABC's Wide World of Sports was the cutting edge of TV sports coverage. Do you remember the opening? The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. Week after week for over a decade, we saw the same terrible crash as Vinko Bogataj, a respected ski jumper from Slovenia, experienced a total meltdown and slid off the side of the jump in a blaze of thrashing arms and legs and skis and poles. This man, an expert ski jumper and Olympic competitor, will always be remembered for one of the worst moments in his career. This is what we do. We remember mistakes, ours and others, and those moments become the defining event in our lives. This is the fate that awaits the anonymous bride and groom in today's gospel reading. Wine was very important in the time of Jesus. Wine was the normal beverage at any meal, but especially at festivals and celebrations. In the Old Testament, an abundance of good wine was a sign of the joyous arrival of God's new age, a sign of God's favor. Isaiah writes, "On this mountain the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wines." Amos writes, "On that day the mountains shall drip with sweet wine, and the hills shall flow with it." Wine was a symbol of joy. It was the symbol of a center of every celebration. The fact that the family hosting the wedding has run out of wine threatens them with a serious loss of honor. Friends usually sent supplies, including wine, to the bride and groom to be available for the wedding celebration. So a lack of wine implies a lack of friends. And this would be more than an embarrassment for this newlywed couple. It would mean a life lived in the shadow of ridicule. They would forever be known as the couple who ran out of wine at their wedding. This one event could follow them for the rest of their lives. But Mary, who is at the wedding with her son and his disciples, decides this can't happen. So she turns to Jesus and says just 4 words. "They have no wine." He is hesitant. There's that matter of timing. It's not his time yet. But in the end, he saves the couple from this horrible fate. And not only does he ensure that they won't run out of wine, he creates an overwhelming abundance of the very best wine they have ever tasted. Have you done the math? I hadn't for a long time. There were 6 stone jars there, each capable of holding 20 or 30 gallons. That's over 700 bottles of wine. this couple went from running out of wine to having enough wine to swim in. The wine in this story is a symbol of God's grace. The author of the Gospel of John has spent the first chapter setting the story up. It begins with poetry and grandeur. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. This is big stuff. Jesus is responsible for everything that has been made. This whole universe, all of creation, has been made by him. John goes on to tell us that the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, full of grace and truth. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. Grace upon grace. That is what the gospel, the good news, is all about. This Jesus, who is responsible for the creation of all that exists, loves us enough to come into the world to give us grace upon grace. Our gospel text for today proclaims the abundance of that grace. John tells us that Jesus, who is the light of the world, cares enough to save an anonymous wedding couple from embarrassment, from a life together as the couple who ran out of wine at their wedding. There's a story called A Day at the Beach by Arthur Gordon. In it, he describes a period in his life when he found that everything had gone stale and life seemed empty. The time came when he knew he had to have some help, so he went to his family doctor, someone with years of experience and a great deal of accumulated wisdom and insight. He told the doctor, "I just don't know what's wrong, but I seem to have come to a dead end. Can you help me?" The doctor asked, "Where were you happiest as a child?" Gordon responded, "Why, at the beach, I suppose. We had a summer cottage there. We all loved it." The doctor said, "All right, here's what I want you to do. Drive to the beach tomorrow morning, no later than 9. You can take some lunch, but I want you to go alone. Don't take a book to read, don't listen to the radio, and don't talk to anyone. I'm giving you prescriptions to be taken every 3 hours." The doctor tore off 3 prescription blanks, wrote a few words on each one, folded them and numbered them, and handed them to Gordon. "Take these," he said, "at 12, 3, and 6. The rest of this story is about the day at the beach, a day of silence, recollection, memory, of being ministered to and healed by the sights and sounds of ocean and sky. The doctor's prescriptions were brief instructions about spending the time. The first said, "Listen carefully." The 3 o'clock prescription said, "Try reaching back." At the end, Gordon writes, "The western sky was a blaze of crimson as I took out the last slip of paper. 6 words this time. Write your memories on the sand." I reached down and picked up a fragment of shell. Kneeling there under the vault of the sky, I wrote several words on the sand. Then I walked away and did not look back. I had written my troubles on the sand, and the tide was coming in. When the wine runs out, there's a guest at the wedding who can do something about it. When the wine runs out at the wedding of your life, Jesus is there to make more. It's not just good wine, it's great wine. And he doesn't just make a little. He makes gallons of it and pours out grace upon grace. Just as words written in the sand are washed away by the ocean tide, so God washes away all our sins in an ocean of grace. His love is a pure gift. He pours it out freely, lavishly, extravagantly. There's so much there that it will never run out. The world may judge us. People may remember us for our mistakes. We may be hard on ourselves and see ourselves as unworthy. as people who have run out of wine in the midst of the wedding of life. But God sees us as objects of deep affection. God sees us as beloved children, as people to be cared about forever. If ever the wine runs low in the wedding of your life, Jesus is there to make more. He pours it out abundantly, extravagantly, for he came into the world to bring us grace upon grace. Amen.